Hello and welcome to the data overview for Addison Elementary. My name is Amanda Rivas, and this is meant to be a data overview for the 5th grade data team and our BLT team in order to improve instruction and student achievement at Addison. The purpose of this presentation is to go over some of the milestone data from the last 4 years, to compare that data with the state of Georgia and Cobb County, and then to identify some strengths and weaknesses that exist in the domains and among subgroups. We're going to analyze data to establish short-term and long-term goals and to provide strategies for students who require them. So some questions to consider are, what are the strengths and weaknesses that are revealed to us in the domains? How can we use intervention or RTI to improve this data? And then what subgroups require more support? In terms of enrollment data, you can see that the state enrollment has gone down slightly. The Cobb County enrollment has taken a plunge, and Addison Elementary's enrollment has actually increased. It's the only one to have increased from 2016 to 2017. In terms of our details of attendance, we have over 50% attending school with 5 days or less being absent. And we have a very small percentage of students who are absent more than 15 days. Unfortunately, our numbers for between 6 and 15 days are also high. So this is an area that we need to get down. Our enrollment data for Addison in terms of race and ethnicity is showing a large majority of white students, an increase, and it's a pretty steady increase of Hispanic students, and an increase every year. We've been getting more and more African American students. Our numbers for natives and multiracial or Asian and Pacific Islander are relatively low in comparison with other districts, but we are increasing our diversity. In terms of the programs that we offer, we have a very steady figure going across. Our EIP students have increased from 2016 to 2017, and our ESOL has actually slightly decreased. Our number of special education students is also on the rise, and our gifted students are also on the rise, as well as our economically disadvantaged students. Unfortunately, our economically disadvantaged students are our largest group here. So this is going to play a role in the data that we see. In terms of the staff, you can see that Addison teachers have mostly between 1 to 10 years experience of teaching, but we also have a good number of teachers who are in that 11 to 20 year range, with very few teachers in the 30+ years. Our educational level for Addison teachers is actually pretty impressive, in my opinion. We have the majority of teachers with master's degrees, and we have some specialist degrees and doctorates in there. We do need some more teachers with specialist degrees and doctorates, but this is something that I know that our administrators are pushing for in order to get teachers in the mode that they need to be in order to professionally intervene with the student needs. Our demographics are something that it didn't shock me, but it kind of upset me. As you can tell, our white teachers are at the top of the numbers spectrum. There is only one Hispanic teacher and one teacher of Asian descent, which is Indian, and that one of those is myself, the Hispanic teacher, and the other is also in 5th grade. So this is important because, as you saw in the previous demographic slide, we have an increasing number of students who are diverse and minority students. And it's important that students see themselves in the instructors that they have. It's important that we have teachers who can culturally relate to students, but also provide a sense of likeness. In terms of gender as well, unfortunately, we only have 2 male teachers at this point, and the rest are female. I think, again, it's important that we have some male teachers, especially considering we have a majority of male students. So this is the 5th grade milestone data from 2014 to 2018, at the end of 2018. As you can tell, we have 3 different categories: State, Cobb, and Addison. One thing that's made me pretty proud is that Addison is consistently ahead of the state and the county in distinguished and proficient levels. Fortunately, we do see a large number of developing and beginning students, still more than we would like to see, especially considering that our numbers are increasing. In terms of our data trends from 2014 to 2018, we have a large amount of students in the proficient and distinguished portion, but as you can tell, we've also got a large portion in the developing category, larger than we would like to see. This is the comparison data for this past year, 2017-2018. As you can tell, one thing I want to point out is that Addison does not have enough data to support the same data traits from the state and Cobb. We don't have enough of the 2 or more races in order to satisfy that data range, and we don't have enough American Indian or Asian students to satisfy that. So we only have 3 different categories, Black, White, and Hispanic, represented in the data for Addison, which is unfortunate because it's not a complete comparison. But what we can tell from the data is, just looking at the numbers of the Hispanic students and the white students and Black students, Addison has a large number of proficient learners that are Hispanic as compared with the state and the county, and we have an unfortunately high number of developing numbers that are African American. It doesn't go along with the same ratio, and unfortunately across the board I see that African Americans are not being reflected in the data in a positive way. So this is something that is going to be part of our school's weaknesses that we're going to have to work on. In terms of data, as I mentioned earlier, we have a large number of male students, and if we look at the data trend, we'll see that from 2016 to 2017, there was a slight dip in the performance of our male students and an increase in our female students. If we look at subgroups, and we're specifically looking at ability, we have students with disabilities, not students with disabilities, are English language learners, and students who are not are English language learners. And we can see across the board that our students with disabilities and our students with disabilities are the group that are consistently not performing as well. And we have students who are English language learners only on the 2016 graph because we did not have enough L students to create a data set for the 2017 group. But if we're looking at the 2016, we can see that the English language learners are performing at pretty high levels in proficient. And so we want to make sure that our students with disabilities are working toward that set as well. One thing that I noticed that was pretty upsetting here was the amount of distinguished learners that we have for our L's and our students with disabilities. And normally we might see this and say, oh, well, it makes sense because they have a disability, or oh, it makes sense because they're still learning English. But what we've seen in Addison, in 5th grade in particular, is that our students are still high functioning in math, even if their reading or their language abilities might be a little lower than grade level. So this is something that we know we have to work on a lot in intervention, and we want to make sure that we identify these students early and can work with them. In terms of our data comparison for economic status, this is another space where we see that our students with economic disadvantage are unfortunately our higher group for developing and beginning learners. This has been consistent. We see actually that there's a large amount of students who are not economically disadvantaged in the proficient and in the distinguished. We know that we're going to have more students next year, so I'm curious as to how that's going to affect these numbers. In terms of the domain data, we see that there are weaknesses in the algebraic thinking, as well as in the fractions domains. So this poses some questions. It may be because geometry, measurement, and base 10 are something that we work on early on, and so they're kind of revolving standards. The majority of fractions in algebra are introduced in 5th grade, but are we spending enough time on these? Are we making enough time with these domains in order for students to latch on to the concepts? Are we allowing the students enough opportunities to practice these skills? So some of the strengths across the board was an increase in enrollment. Addison has higher than 50% of its students attending with 5 or less days absent. We have an increased enrollment in diversity. Compared to the state and the district, our scores have been consistently higher, and our English language learners are performing well in math despite issues with language. Unfortunately, we have some weaknesses as well, and these are the things that we need to work on in our data teams. We have an increase of students who are at an economic disadvantage. We don't have enough diverse teachers to relate to diverse students in order to make sure that lessons stay culturally relevant and authentic. Our Black students have a very high rate as developing learners when compared to other populations. Our students are struggling in the domains of algebra and fractions. Our economically disadvantaged students are performing below our non-economically disadvantaged students. Our English language learners and students with disabilities are not in the distinguished category. And we have a consistent high rate of students missing 6 to 15 days of school each year. So some discussion questions are, how can we improve our math scores with our English language learners and students with disabilities? What can we do to improve attendance to see improvement with student learning? What changes can we make to intervention to improve algebra and fraction domains and to move students up a proficiency level? How can we support our students with economic disadvantages and help their math achievement? and how can we support math and other subjects to give students